Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. A couple of weeks ago I filmed a video about my beginner runner tips and I mentioned in that video that I'd switched my laptop off, why is it still making sounds? I mentioned that I also wanted to make a video for my first half marathon tips, advice. I am by no means a professional runner. I have run precisely one half marathon and that was about 6 months ago, and I've done very little running since. I do intend to pick it back up and I am slowly picking it back up, hence why I am filming these videos. But yeah, just take that in with you. And obviously there are many other running influencers who are professional runners who can probably give you some more advice, but this is just from personal experience, things I noticed or things I wish I had or that I was glad I did at my first half marathon. And they're in no particular order. So the first one is just to make sure you bring lots of tissues and toilet paper. I brought lots of tissues with me anyway because I know that sometimes my nose gets a bit runny, and I just wanted to make sure that I didn't run out. But also I had been told that sometimes the porta potties or whatever they're called run out of toilet paper. I didn't realise just how bad this was. I got to the event, I want to say it was about 2 hours before my start time. I was in one of the last waves though, but I went to the bathroom as soon as we got there more or less, and it was all fine, well stocked, etc. And then I went again, I don't know, not long before my race started, and everything had run out. And I didn't want to use my tissues for toilet paper because I knew that I wanted the tissues for the half marathon. So just make sure you really stock up. I also didn't use any bathrooms on the race, but if you know that you might need to, again, just make sure you are well equipped because yeah, you don't want to be stuck. Regardless, you just don't want to be stuck. I also would recommend bringing your own water. They did have water stations, and I imagine that most half marathons will tell you where those stations are. Mine certainly did. But I also knew that I didn't want to be reliant on those stations. And do you know what? Thank goodness I brought my own water because it ended up being a lot hotter on the day, A, than anything I'd practiced, and B, than anything I was prepared for. So I was very glad I had my own bottle. And actually at my half marathon, and I know most half marathons probably don't do this, but instead of just a cup of water, they actually gave you a bottle of water at each stop, like a small one. But I kept those bottles with me if I didn't finish drinking them, so that I could keep them if I needed them again between, I think it was every 3 miles. So if I needed them at some point in those 3 miles, I just always made sure I had a little bit of spare water, and I needed it desperately. So yeah, just make sure, even if it's just a small, like the one I brought for myself was also small, and it just fit in my pocket, but I would recommend always having some water because you just don't know what the weather's going to be like or how dehydrated you might be, and you don't want to feel faint. And I did feel faint even though I had brought my own water, so yeah, just be stocked up. Next, I would personally recommend bringing some sort of either salty or fresh snack. I didn't like the thought of having to pay for gels, and also I've heard that the taste and the texture just doesn't work for everyone, so I just did not want to tread into those waters. So I fueled myself with Sour Patch Kids and Percy Pigs, and I did that on all my training runs and it worked and I was happy with it. But one thing I found, I think again because it was so hot, was the sweets were just like getting a bit sickly, especially the longer the run went on, and that I wanted something like, you know, cucumber or pretzels, just something that either was a bit fresh or a bit salty or both. And again, this might depend. If you know yourself well, and you know you're guaranteed to be running in the middle of winter and you're going to be fine, trust yourself. But personally for myself, for future reference, I would recommend having something with you that you can, you know, fuel on, that balances out the sweetness of all the sweets and sugar and energy. Next, this one's huge, but I'm sure it's like the #1 thing you see on every half marathon website or whatever, but that is to make sure that you plan your journey and get there early. When we arrived, well, first of all, actually, the day we arrived, there were tube strikes, so we already had to sort of jig around what our journey was going to look like, and the journey time was a lot longer as a result. We did still get there early, as I say, I did have plenty of time, but you just do not want to be stressing at the start line. And when we arrived, there was just, it looked so chaotic. I'm sure there was an organisation to it, but walking up, I just felt very overwhelmed, especially because it was my first half marathon and I was already stressed about like the run itself. So you just want to make sure that you've got time to familiarise yourself with where bag drop is, where the toilets are, where the start line is, where the like entering channel is, and also where they're making the announcements about when the start times are, because that was one thing I really struggled with as well, was like trying to keep track of which wave was going in, and when it was my turn. So yeah, just give yourself time. The next tip I've written actually relates to something I said a little earlier, which is there is a difference between, you know, just regular running discomfort and struggling and it's hard, compared to, you know, pain or injury or feeling faint. And you need to be able to identify that. And hopefully this is something you do become familiar with on your training runs. You know, you start to know the difference between, ow, that hurts, and oh, this is really hard, but you know, my body isn't in pain. And you need to listen to that, and that can be hard. I had many different goals for my half marathon, almost all of which I didn't achieve. And again, I do think that's just the heat. And it was disappointing to have to stop running at like, I think it was about 8 kilometers in. I didn't even get to the 10 kilometers, which was really, oh, maybe I just got to 10. I can't remember, but my goal was definitely like to get to Tower Bridge without stopping. And I had to stop well before that, but I knew that if I didn't stop, I literally might have passed out. I could just feel it in myself. I could sense that I was dehydrated. I didn't feel like I had enough energy or sugar. So I stopped to walk, and I had some sweets and I had some water. And obviously you make a plan and you try to stick to it. But at the end of the day, the main thing for me at least was just to get across the finish line. And if that meant stopping to walk a lot more than I wanted to, that's what it meant. And you need to be able to identify that. Same with any pain or injury. You know, you want to be able to identify the difference between, oh, my legs are sore because I've been running for 20 kilometers, and I've broken my toe or whatever. And again, like, it's also about how do I then get to the finish line if that is still a goal. And I was struggling with ITBS for a lot of my training runs. And just before I would say around 19 kilometers, it really flared back up. Like, it was mostly fine during the half marathon, I think, because I was walking so much. But yeah, those last 2 kilometers, I remember being in so much pain. And again, it was just about finding the balance of when do I walk, when do I run, just to get to the finish line. But again, like, I was lucky that I knew it wasn't going to cause significant damage if I did run and continue to walk. But equally, you know, if it was something that could actually, you know, a stress fracture or anything that can cause long-term damage, you want to make sure you're not doing something silly. Next, you want to make sure that you plan your meals prior to the event quite carefully. From what the internet told me, for half marathons, it recommended about 48 hours before starting with carb loading. And so I made a big plan of like what I was going to have for every single meal and snacks in the 48 hours leading up to the half marathon. Try not to have any new foods. I'm sure you've heard that already. And then like making sure that I was well stocked up in terms of shopping and also like meal prep, because I knew that I wouldn't want to be doing too much cooking. And it just meant that I felt like I had fueled as perfectly as I could, even though obviously I did encounter some issues on race day. Yeah, you just want to make sure that you've got a good plan and you know what you're having. And also on that, like, make sure you drink loads of water. Drinking loads of water the morning of will not do enough for you, because it takes, I think, about 4 hours or something for the water to like actually enter your hydration system or whatever. So make sure the day before, at least, I would say 2 days before, that you're really drinking plenty, because yeah, you need it. This next point I've actually already talked about, but it's walk if you have to, do whatever you have to do to make it to the end. It's good to have goals. I set many different ones, as I've said, but at the end of the day, my main goal was just to get across the finish line, and I did what I had to do that, which included lots of walking. And there is no harm in walking. Every positive running influencer I've seen agrees with me that walking doesn't diminish or take away from the run that you're doing. It still counts as a run, it's still a race. So yeah, just listen to your body and do what you need to do. And this one actually also relates to that point, which is have one clear, strict and realistic goal and then side goals if you want. I've seen a lot of running influencers talk about an A, B and C goal, where I can't remember if A is like the best goal and then C is sort of what, like, I can't remember which way round it is. But let's say for the half marathon, your A goal is under 2.5 hours, your B goal is under 2:45 and your C goal is under 3. But then I would still say, but my first goal above and beyond all that is just to finish. And in fact, I think the half marathon I did have a cut-off time of 4 hours. So it was just like, get across that finish line in less than 4 hours. That was my goal. But then, as I say, I also had the goal of getting to Tower Bridge without stopping to walk. And a couple of other things, which I can't remember now. And it's good to have little goals that you can try and work towards and that will keep you, occupied and your brain going while you're running. But it's also good to have a very strong, realistic goal that is achievable, but maybe still a bit of a challenge, like for me, finishing the half marathon full stop. But for you, it could be in under 3 hours, in under 2:45, in under 2.5, whatever. Everyone has their own pace, but yeah, just make sure you've got something that you can really work towards that is effortful, but also you're likely to be able to achieve. And my final tip that I could think of anyway, for now, is to make sure you bring wet wipes or like something for your hands, because they can get quite sticky. Again, it was hot, so I was sweating, so anyway, it was sticky, and I was trying to film stuff as well while I was running, and I was having sweets. And then at one of the stations, I had a Lucozade, and that was in a cup, and it spilled, and like, you just end up with really icky hands, and I would have liked to have some wet wipes on me just to be able to like clear it off and feel a bit fresher. And I feel like you could probably also use it for your face, just to like revive you a little bit while you're struggling through 21.1 kilometers. But anyway, those are my tips. If you've run a half marathon, please feel free to let us know some other tips you might have. And yeah, I'm gonna keep you posted about my running journey if I continue to run, probably in my vlogs, unless I really have like another big goal, in which case I'll start a new series. I did do a series for my half marathon training, and before that I did a series for my 10-kilometer run training. So if you want to watch any of that, feel free. And good luck. Have a great time, have fun. Like, that's another, I didn't put this as a tip, but you definitely want to try and enjoy it and soak in, the sights, if there are sights to be soaked in, and the atmosphere. Like, it's so special to be running with so many thousands of people, or hundreds, or however many are doing the run with you, but like, just being part of that environment and seeing the spectators on the side and the cheering and, the signs. I loved looking at the signs, and if there were kids with their hands out, or even adults with their hands out, I wanted to give everyone I could a high five, even if it slowed me down a little, just because you need that drive, you need that energy. So make the most of it, enjoy it, have a great time, and yeah, feel free to drop down some other tips once you've done it. Bye!